I'm 35, divorced for almost 4 years now, and co-parenting my daughter, Emily, who just turned 6. I thought I had the whole single mom navigating life thing down pretty well. We had our routine, our tiny 2-bedroom rental, and a calm kind of rhythm I really came to appreciate after the chaos of my marriage ended. My ex, Dan, sees Emily every other weekend. That's about it. He's not a bad father, just unreliable. He forgets birthdays, misses school events, and makes grand promises he never follows through on. Emily used to cry about it a lot when she was younger. These days, she's used to disappointment. She stopped asking when he's coming around, stopped waiting by the window. About 6 weeks ago, Emily started talking about someone new. Not in a way that raised red flags at first. She just casually mentioned Daddy Mike a few times. I thought she meant Dan's brother, her actual uncle, Mike. But then she said something strange one morning while we were driving to school. She told me that Daddy Mike helped her tie her shoes and made her pancakes. That didn't make sense. We were alone that weekend. Dan was out of town, and no one had visited. I asked her who Daddy Mike was, and she just smiled and said, "You'll meet him soon. He's really funny and he gives me piggyback rides." I pulled over immediately and looked her straight in the eye. I asked again, where did she see this man? And that's when things got weird. She said, "He comes to my room sometimes when you're asleep. But don't worry. He said he's here to help." My stomach dropped. That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every rustle in the house had me on edge. I kept checking the baby monitor, even though Emily hadn't used it in years. I hadn't heard anything unusual in the past, but now? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next morning, I asked Emily again about Daddy Mike. I tried to make it seem casual, like I wasn't worried. But she gave me this look, like she knew I wouldn't understand, and simply said, "He's my friend. He says he's known me since before I was born." That made my skin crawl. That day, I installed a security system. Cameras in the hallway, one outside her room, motion detectors, everything. I even called Dan and asked if he'd sent someone over, maybe a friend or relative I didn't know about. He laughed, said no, and told me I needed to relax. Typical Dan, never took anything seriously unless it affected him directly. The next few nights were quiet. Nothing on the cameras. No alerts. Emily seemed happy. Unbothered. She kept drawing pictures of a tall man with a red hat and glasses. I assumed that was Daddy Mike. When I asked why he wore red all the time, she just said, "It's his favorite color. It hides the stains." I didn't ask what kind of stains. That Friday, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a noise light, like the sound of something dragging. I sat up, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the camera feed. Everything looked normal. But then I heard a whisper. I swear, it came from the hallway. Not loud. Not even clear. But it wasn't in my head. I got up slowly, opened my door, and looked out. Emily's door was open. Just a crack. And her nightlight? It was off. I walked to her door, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my ears. I pushed it open slowly, expecting, I don't even know what. A shadow? A figure standing over her bed? But there was nothing. Just Emily, curled up and breathing softly under her blanket. Still, the night light was definitely off, and she never, ever sleeps without it. I reached down, flicked it back on, and stood there a moment longer, scanning every inch of her room. Then I saw it. On the far corner of the wall, near her little desk, one of her drawings was pinned upside down. I hadn't noticed it before, but this one was different. It wasn't a cute crayon sketch. It was done in dark red marker, almost brown. The lines were frantic, scribbled. And the man, Daddy Mike, looked wrong. His face was all teeth. His eyes were empty circles. And at the bottom, in a child's uneven handwriting, were the words, "He watches you too." I took it down immediately and shoved it into a drawer. The rest of the night, I sat in the hallway, back against the wall, clutching a kitchen knife, just in case. In the morning, Emily acted like nothing happened. She was cheerful, humming as she got ready for school. I asked her about the drawing. She blinked and said she didn't remember making it. I checked the cameras again. Nothing. No alerts. No movement. Nothing showing anyone going into her room. But that night, when I tucked her in and kissed her forehead, she grabbed my hand and whispered, "He's mad at you now." I didn't respond. I just smiled weakly, brushed her hair back, and told her to sleep tight. But my blood turned to ice. Those words replayed in my head on a loop, "He's mad at you now." What the hell did that even mean? After she fell asleep, I checked the cameras again. Same result. Nothing. No sounds, no motion, no flickering lights. Just a still, quiet hallway and a peacefully sleeping 6-year-old girl. But I knew something was off. I could feel it in the air. It was thicker than usual. Heavy, like it didn't want me walking around. I didn't go to bed that night. I stayed in the living room with my laptop and started searching everything I could find: child hallucinations, imaginary friends, psychological disorders. At first, the results were rational, clinical, things like stress, trauma, coping mechanisms. But the deeper I scrolled, the weirder it got. Forums, threads, posts from other parents describing eerily similar experiences. Children describing the same man in red, who appeared at night, only spoke to them, and became aggressive when the parents started to interfere. One post in particular stood out. It was short, just a photo of a wall drawing eerily similar to Emily's, with the words "he likes it when mom sleeps." No comments. No explanation. The account was deleted. The next morning, I noticed 3 tiny scratches near the base of Emily's bedroom door. Thin and deliberate. Too low for a person, but not a pet. We don't have one. I asked Emily again about Daddy Mike. She looked nervous for the first time. She whispered, "He told me not to talk about him anymore." "Not to you." That was the moment I decided we weren't staying here anymore. By that evening, I'd booked a week-long stay at a hotel across town. I didn't tell Emily why. We just packed up clothes, a few of her toys, and left. She didn't argue. In fact, she seemed relieved. As if she'd been waiting for me to do something. I didn't sleep that first night in the hotel either, but at least there were no whispers, no creepy drawings, no imaginary visitors. The next few days were uneventful. Emily was brighter, more energetic. She even laughed again, a real laugh, not that stiff little giggle she'd been doing at home. I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. I went back to the house once, during the day, just to grab a few more essentials. I half expected to find something messed up: drawings, things moved, maybe even more scratches on the walls. But everything was exactly as I'd left it. Almost too perfect. That's what got to me. I grabbed our things quickly and locked up behind me. That night, Emily told me Daddy Mike can't find us now. Her voice was flat, like she was just stating a fact. I asked her how she knew. She said, "Because he's really mad. He screamed into the wall when he couldn't see me. He screamed for you." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I asked her when that happened, hoping she meant before we left. She just smiled faintly and said, "Last night. We were at the hotel last night. That was supposed to be the safe place." I was done pretending this was all in my head. The next morning, I contacted a child therapist. I didn't tell her everything, just said my daughter had an intense attachment to an imaginary friend and that it had started affecting her sleep. She agreed to meet us in 2 days. Emily was quiet on the drive home from school that afternoon, just staring out the window, tapping her fingers against the seatbelt buckle in a rhythm I didn't recognize. I asked her what she was thinking about, and she said, "He doesn't like people asking questions." That night, while she slept curled beside me in the hotel bed, I heard a soft tap 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 from the wall. 3 slow, steady taps, like someone gently knocking from the other side. I didn't move, just lay there frozen, breathing through my nose, trying not to cry. I don't know how I fell asleep, but I did eventually. The next morning, I went to grab Emily's backpack from the table. I unzipped the front pocket looking for her notebook. And that's when I found it. Another drawing. It was on hotel stationery, paper I know she didn't touch. The man in the red hat again, but this time he wasn't smiling. His teeth were jagged, and his eyes were dripping like melting wax. Behind him was a shape, me, tied to a chair. And scrawled in thick black crayon were the words, "Stop moving her or I'll come for you instead." I asked Emily if she drew it. She said, "No. He left it in my bag so you'd listen." 2 days later, I took Emily to her therapy session. The therapist, Dr. Halley, was warm, calm, and didn't seem rattled when I told her about Daddy Mike. I left the drawing in her hands and watched her expression shift from polite interest to something more cautious. She asked Emily to talk about the man in the red hat. At first, Emily clammed up, wouldn't say a word. But after a few minutes alone with Dr. Halley, something cracked. I sat outside the offices pacing, sipping terrible coffee, wondering what secrets my daughter had been carrying around. When the session ended, Dr. Halley asked to speak with me alone. Her tone was measured but serious. She didn't think Emily was making this up. Not entirely. She said sometimes children externalize trauma or anxiety through figures like imaginary friends, but this one, she said, felt different. She asked me something that made my stomach twist. "Have you or Emily ever experienced anything unusual in your home before this started? Objects moving? Strange feelings?" I told her about the whispers, the open door, the drawing, the scratches. Then she asked something that chilled me to the bone. Has anyone died in your house recently? I said no. But I remembered something. When I first moved in, just after the divorce, the woman down the street came over with a casserole and made a strange comment. Something about the house having been quiet for a while. At the time, I thought she meant no one had lived there in months. Now I wasn't so sure. Dr. Hallie told me she'd do more sessions with Emily but recommended, gently, that we not return to the house yet. She didn't say why. But when I got home, there was a new voicemail waiting on my phone. From my old neighbor. Her voice was shaking. You need to call me back. Right away. It's about your house. And the man your daughter keeps talking about. I called her immediately. Her voice cracked the moment she picked up. She apologized for not saying anything sooner, said she thought we were fine, and didn't want to scare me off when I moved in. Then she asked, did your daughter call him Mike? I said yes. Dead silence. Then she told me everything. The previous owners had a son named Michael. He was in his late 20s and had lived in the basement for years. No one in the neighborhood saw much of him. He was quiet, withdrawn. The kind of guy who didn't make eye contact when you waved. 3 years ago, just after his mother passed, Michael snapped. He had a breakdown, started telling people that something in the walls was talking to him, telling him secrets, warning him about people trying to take her place. He believed his mother would come back, but only if no one else lived in the house. One night, he set fire to the basement. The fire department responded quickly and no one was hurt, but Michael vanished. Disappeared completely. There were rumors he was spotted a few towns over, living off the grid. But no one really knew what happened to him. And then she said something that made my entire body lock up. The cops never found his body. But we think he came back. I asked why. Her reply was barely a whisper. Because your daughter's not the first child to mention a man in a red hat. I ended the call shaking. Emily was napping peacefully in the hotel bed, unaware that her so-called daddy Mike might be a very real person, and not some ghost or figment of her imagination. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't keep living in fear, couldn't keep looking over my shoulder, waiting for some shadow to slip through the cracks. So I went back to the house. I didn't tell anyone. I just needed to see for myself. It was mid-afternoon, full daylight. I walked from room to room slowly, noting everything, searching for any sign of forced entry. Every door was locked, every window secure. Nothing seemed out of place, until I stepped into Emily's room. I don't know what drew my attention to the floor, but I noticed a section of the hardwood near her bed looked darker. Like the finish had worn off in one spot. I knelt down and tapped it. Hollow. My hands trembled as I fetched a screwdriver from the kitchen and pried up the edge. The board lifted easier than I expected. Underneath, wedged between joists and insulation, was a pile of objects, a child's sock, a broken keychain, a crumpled juice box. Random, almost garbage, until I saw what was at the very bottom. A small, faded photo. Water-damaged and torn at the corners. A man, early 30s maybe. Pale. Unshaven. Wearing a red baseball cap. I flipped it over. On the back, scribbled in shaky pen. She doesn't get to replace her. No one does. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the hotel room, holding the photo in my hands. I finally believed it. Daddy Mike wasn't imaginary. He was still there. The next morning, I went straight to the police. I brought the photo, the drawing, even the old neighbor's statement. They were skeptical, especially since there was no proof of forced entry, but the detective agreed to send a team to check the house, just in case. He said sometimes squatters return to places they know. He promised to update me if they found anything. I didn't go back. I couldn't. Not with Emily. Instead, I sat in the hotel lobby most of the day, staring at the entrance. Every person in a red cap made my heart skip. I couldn't shake the idea that he was still watching us. That evening, I got the call. They'd found a crawl space under the basement, sealed from the inside with rusted nails and warped wood. When they opened it, the smell hit them first, damp, rot, something worse. Inside were the remains of old sleeping bags, food wrappers, and a wall covered in drawings. All of Emily. Crayon outlines of her face, stick figures of her holding hands with a tall man in red. One showed her sleeping. Another showed her crying. And in the corner, a message, written over and over. She's mine now. She called me daddy. But there was no sign of him. Just traces, footprints, hair, DNA. Enough to confirm he had been living there. They think he was coming and going through the storm drain system behind the house. They're still searching the area. I asked if they thought he'd come back. The detective looked me dead in the eyes and said, he already did. We're staying with my sister now, 2 towns over. Emily's in therapy. She doesn't mention him anymore, not once since we left. I told her Daddy Mike wasn't allowed to visit ever again, and she just nodded. Like she already knew. I still have the photo. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe as a reminder. Not everything your child imagines is pretend. Some monsters knock gently. Some even wait until you're asleep. And some are already in your home before you ever realize you're in danger. Update. They found a red hat in the woods near the house last week. Torn, blood-stained. But no man. Not yet.